By the end of this video, you should have an understanding of how to operate and navigate through Nuke, at least to enough of a level to start out with your first comp. There's a lot to break down. It may seem intimidating, but overall, I promise, while maybe it won't be easy, it will be worth it. You just got to practice and you'll get there faster than you think, really. Biggest piece of advice I can give you is actually just to start doing any task you can think of that you would have done in either Fusion or After Effects, and slowly transferring over and seeing if it's possible within Nuke. More than you think is easier to do than not. So just have some courage, see what happens. A lot of resources on the internet. I hope that I can continue to be one of them. So I'm going to be breaking down the things that I've learned over using Nuke daily for the last 2.5 years. And let me know if there's any topic that I can break down. Now, I'm going to be starting as if you've never opened the software before, or you've opened it and quickly closed it. So if you have an indie license, you may be pulled up to a timeline type workspace. To get over, you select your node graph. This is kind of what you'd be expecting to look at. I personally would start out with the compositing workspace, which is up here at the top where it says workspace and then compositing. You've got a pretty basic looking interface, right? This is, well, it's not basic. It definitely feels like you're operating some type of rocket ship. However, it's not much more complicated than After Effects. So once you've already gotten to that point, I'm sure that this is something you can familiarize yourself with. This is going to be your node graph. In order to navigate it, you can use your middle mouse button, which will allow you to go up, down, side to side, left, right, whatever the heck. Zooming in, zooming out. I use the F key quite a bit to frame center the node that is selected. You also have your standard file, edit, workspace, viewer, render, cache, window, all this good stuff. You probably won't have the Rebel Ways tools, as well as some of these sidebars you won't have. But the sidebars are essentially all of your various tools that you have access to. These tools can also be accessible by hitting tab on your keyboard and searching through, just kind of like how if you had the video copilot effect search, or what do they call it? I don't know. I don't remember what they call it, but it's great. And if you're in After Effects, you should definitely be using it because it makes it function the same. You can just search up any effect, automatically drop it down. Let's just start simple, okay? You wanna set your aspect ratio, you wanna set your frame rate, you wanna set your color space. Well, there's two ways to do that. You're either gonna hit edit and go down to project settings, or you can see that there is a shortcut there for S. I think it's really beneficial to get in the habit of using some of these hotkeys. You are going to be using them quite a bit. So make sure that your cursor is over here on the properties tab, hit S, boom, you got your project settings. Your project settings will kind of vary dependent on the footage that you're working with, right? So just for example purposes, let's say you're rocking with a 23.98 as your frame rate. Maybe it's 24, maybe it's 25, maybe it's 29, maybe it's 30. It could be anything under the sun, whatever's clever to you. There's a whole list of aspect ratios here that you can click on under the file size format. Let's just assume you're working with a standard 3840 by 2160. And now in Nuke Indie, you are limited to resolution. I want to say it's something like 12 million pixels, which turns out to be 4096 by 203060, something along those lines. You have to do a little bit of testing. It's never been a big deal for me. If it does end up being a big deal for you because for whatever reason you're outputting an 8K resolution, which is absurd. If a client is asking for an 8K, I just think they're wrong. They don't need it, more than likely. But you could always render out each corner of the screen and then put that together in something like DaVinci Resolve, which the free version I'm pretty sure is capable of doing. But even if it's not, it's a couple $100. So it can be worth it to have DaVinci in replacement to Premiere. I also do find myself using the actual sequence inside of Nuke, but that's just my personal preference anyway. I like having, dynamic scripts and things like that. So we've set our frame rate, we've set our file size format. For color space, if you're not using ASIS already, I highly, highly, highly recommend, cannot stress this enough, that you set this over to ASIS, Studio Config, ASIS 1.3. It's it's next level. You don't you don't want to operate any other way. It makes it really easy to import log files, view them in a transform like sRGB or Rec 709, or maybe even a custom transform, and then to output them back as a log file, which is a standard practice to give the colorist exactly what they expect. So especially because colorists can kind of start out working on the log files of the plate, and then if you do proper color management and you're keeping an eye on your values and making sure all your channels are operating the way that they should be, then you can just swap it pretty linearly, and the color should only have to make adjustments for the VFX. Specifically, maybe they're using an alpha or some type of luma matte is what they would call them in After Effects. But you have it set up to ACES, right? You're feeling good, you're feeling great. Now, there's quite a few nodes that I would use on the regular. Your main nodes that you're going to use are going to actually be your read node and your write node. As you can see, read is R, write is W. So let's just type in R. There's got to be a piece of footage I can bring in here. Boom, 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 boom. So yeah, we'll just click on this piece of footage. Right, so this is actually 4448, 3096. Which is too high to render off of, but we'll call it good. So we just set our project size to that size. As you can see, it did actually update with the new format based on the plate that I imported. Now, it's going to say error, and it does say invalid LUT selected Rec 709. Now, if I selected it and I went down to color spaces, utility, Rec 709 1.8, you're going to notice that this is actually a very flat profile. That's because it's not Rec 709. It's that I was given the footage as ProRes, so it's not the raw files, but it's coming through as ProRes, and that ProRes was exported from Premiere or DaVinci or Final Cut. And typically, Rec 709 is the standard working space that these programs start out with. So sometimes that's like embedded into the metadata. I know that it's Arilog C3, so that's what I would use. Maybe you would be using either Panasonic Vlog or Sony S-Log3, S-Gamut 3, or possibly maybe even the Red 3G10, whatever's clever. But most common ones that I'm using are ARRI Log C3, Red Log 3G10, Red Wide Gamut RGB, Panasonic Vlog, Sony S-Log S-Gamut 3, or simply just using Rec 709, whether 1.8, 2.2, 2.2, 2.4, or I'm using an sRGB texture, which could also just be accessed through matte paint, right? So, really just kind of depends on your footage and what you're actually needing. But if you download an asset from the internet, it's more than likely going to be an sRGB or Rec 709. Unless stated otherwise. Let's say it's on a platform like Action VFX or something, right? So we've read our footage in. Now, something interesting about Nuke is that it does prefer to work with image sequences. So if I were to I'm double clicking here. I see that my my frame range is 48. Double check, my frame range matches here. But really, honestly, I would convert all of my footage from MOV over to an EXR file. Assuming that you have an RGBA, right? So this is your alpha. You can access your alpha by hitting A on the keyboard, your red by R, green by G, blue by B. So RGBA, I do have an alpha. If I didn't have an alpha, then I would just render out as an RGB. So that way I'm not storing data that doesn't exist. But then under this circumstance here, we would want to, let's just say, create a proxy for this shot. Let's just say test shot. And I'm going to say test shot. And then I like to make a mark that it's in ACES CG. I like to make a mark for the version number. And then I use the hashtags to actually signify that this is an image sequence rather than an individual image. If you're only rendering out one frame, you could just do it like that. But because I know that I am rendering out multiple frames, you need to make sure that this is there, or else it's going to say that it can't render out an image sequence because you're not defining it as a sequence. So we have an RGB and an A, so we will make sure that that is selected under channels. We will write ACES compliant EXR, setting the output transform to either be ACES CG, and that can just be the working space that you're working in, which is kind of something that I typically practice. Or you could throw it back into that RA log C3 just to make sure, it is exactly the way it was coming in. It's really fine. It's not going to make a difference in the color if you export it out as an ACES CG. So we're just going to render it out by clicking that render button at 1 through 48. It tells us, oh, you cannot use this high of a resolution because you're limited to 12,700,000 pixels, max resolution being 4096. So at that point, then you're going to have to do just a little bit of math to get things in order, right? So I'm going to open up my little calculator app, and I'm going to do 448 divided by 4096. And that's going to tell me what I should be dividing my current resolution by. So let's just say 1.09, just to make it easy. So that'd be 448 divided by 1.09. That puts us at 4081, you could say. And then do 3096 for the same thing, right? So at this point, I would use a node called a sticky note, which is where I can actually write in these values. So let's just say 4080 by 0.734. 4080, 0.734. And then just so I can read it really easily, I'm going to do the same math for the second value being 3096. So 3096 divided by 1.09. So that gives us 2840 by 0.37, we'll say. So this is the resolution that we're going to need to be exporting out of, because that is just the limitation of Nuke Indie. So we're going to type in a reformat node because that's what we're doing. We're reformatting our image. Going to have to set this to new, and we'll just say low res format. So 4080.7. I want to 0.73, and then, whatever. We'll put we'll probably round it anyway. I can't see, whatever. So then 2840 by 0.37. 2840 by rather than round, we'll just leave it like this and let Nuke do whatever it wants to do with that number. So this is our new number, right? It should still look the exact same. It's just low res versus high res. One thing you can do is you could change the resize type if things are looking weird. You could even change it to none if you didn't want it to do any resizing, but obviously we do. Yeah, so lots of different options here. I would change the filter over to one of these last three, the Lankza 6 or 4 or Sin C4 or Sin C4, I don't really know what exactly the math is that they're doing. I just know that they look better than Cubic. You can barely tell a difference here, but you can tell that there is like some post sharpening happening. And I would say that the Sin C4 typically looks the best. So because I'm downsizing, I just think that it's smartest practice for me to give it a little bit of touch of sharpening. So as you can see, now we're rendering through because we're in that resolution that is 12,700,000 pixels. So very quickly, can we render this out as an image sequence? Again, you're gonna work better by working entirely with image sequences rather than with MOV files, because Nuke does work in a way that it cares about frames. It doesn't matter. It doesn't really consider the fact that it's a movie versus an image. It doesn't consider the fact that it's this frame rate or that frame. One frame equals one frame. So therefore, it's just less computation that it has to do by working with something like an EXR rather than having to do a level of like interpreting the codec, whether it's ProRes or H.264, MOV or MP4, yada yada. So we were able to read in this file by hitting R on our keyboard and selecting the file that we want. Sometimes when you're working with a bunch of different write nodes, it might send you to the last write node you were at, maybe if you're exporting out a version or a preview or something of the sort. So I do like to kind of copy from my right node and then hit read, and then I can easily just go bing, bang, bong. Now I got it, right? Now, as you can see, we've got something connected to the viewer node, right? Now, in order to actually decide what is being viewed, you're going to hit 1 or 2 on your keyboard. So you could, in theory, go 1, 2, and now I can swap between the two of them. This is very useful for checking versions. It's very useful for checking, like maybe you don't need to be working off of the final script. You just need to be working off of one section of the script. So I do recommend utilizing that feature, but it's not required. You don't have to do anything. If it's easier for you, you could just work off of the one. Now we have our MOV file converted from a log C3 file reformatted to a format that fits within Nuke, and then we are importing it as an ACE-CG. Shouldn't have any change between the default scene linear and ACE-CG. But if we wanted to, we could totally now export this back as RA-log C3, and it would look the exact same as this did when we were viewing it as the improper view transform. Because what's happening is you're putting in the input transform as RA-log C3, and then you're viewing it through this sRGB display. So you're not actually viewing the log while you are working with the log. So up here, you do have all these controls that are only affecting what you are actually viewing, but they're not affecting the output of your final image. So you can see here that we can increase the brightness and the darkness. We can increase and decrease the gamma, and we can increase and decrease the saturation. This can help with getting a finer edge that you can see better, making it more contrasty, yada yada, just to allow you to, maybe you're trying to pull a matte or something and you just are trying to get an idea of if that's even possible, or you're doing some roto and you want to see, oh, there's that gap between his ear and his hat and his hair and yada yada. Now you have a much easier edge to see than you would otherwise, right? Now, typically how we work inside a Nuke is that we do want the B pipe to be our spine of our comp. It's most organized. It's best practice. So do it. Your B pipe should be the spine. So we're always going to be working background to foreground. So any of your foreground elements would actually be over on the sides here, being plugged into your B, right? So the B maintains that spinal structure, kind of like a tree with a root system, or like pretend like, yeah, this is your head and these are your arms, and then your hips, and then your legs, and they're all coming back into this overall spine, right? There's a few different nodes that you're going to be using quite frequently, like the read and the write. So I recommend getting familiar with those hotkeys. Getting familiar with hotkeys, it's going to be very important for you. So R and W are your most used, but right after that, I would say third most used is probably going to be your merge node. And your merge node is kind of similar to how in After Effects, when you have a bottom layer and you put a layer on top of that, if you have a mask on your top layer, it's essentially merging that top layer as your A and putting it over your B, right? So it's the same thing as right here. B would be the bottom and A would be on top of it, right? So nothing actually changes. Again, we do want to be very conscious of our channels, especially when merging. So we double check that this does have an alpha channel for the background. If it doesn't, we add one. You know the deal, right? So this is the background. Okay, let's just say we want to add a checkerboard, and we want that checkerboard to be the same format, which it is, and we want to add it over top here. Now, what you'll notice about this checkerboard is that when we merge it, it just goes right on top. The reason why is because of the math involved on the alpha channel. So because this is a 1 and this is a 1, it is going to essentially cancel the two out. Now, if we put a transform node and we scaled it down a little bit and you viewed it now, you're going to see that it has some boundary because they're different formats, they're different sizes, right? But if we took out that alpha channel, you're gonna notice that's when the weird stuff starts happening. You're gonna get the semi-transparency. Basically, because there's no alpha channel and then it's being merged over, it's treating the merge like as if you had a zero 0.5 alpha channel rather than a 1 for your alpha channel. So you do want to make sure if you're getting some of this weird overlaying happening, but you're setting it on an over, the operation over or atop shouldn't do anything to the image besides simply place one over the other. So if you're getting some of that weird semi-transparency, I would immediately recommend you just check your alpha channel. Oh, I don't have an alpha channel. You can easily make it constant by clicking shift on a shuffle node over your alpha. And then that's probably the easiest way. Your shuffle nodes, don't be scared of them. They're a lot easier to work with than the legacy shuffle node. Legacy being like the outdated, they're gonna get rid of it soon or eventually. But shuffling your channels out is essential. It's one of the key things of working within Nuke. Kind of think about how in After Effects you can select, you can use that little pick whip to grab onto a different layer and say that you want to use the alpha of that layer, or you want to use like an alpha matte or a luma matte or an inverted. That's essentially what you can do with the shuffle node, but tenfold, because you can access many different channels. You can access any channel that's embedded within the EXR beyond just your RGB or A. And that can be convenient to store different data than just colors in these RGB and A, and to select them and move them and migrate them or merge them into each other. And it's kind of complicated. It sounds complicated, but it really isn't too hard once you get the hang of it, and it's allows for an extreme amount of flexibility. So don't be afraid of the shuffle node. Just start with basic things like this, where you're simply adding a constant alpha channel here by shift clicking on or off. Another option would be to use a copy node, which, as you can see, it says copy channel. You could copy over any channel from one to another, but the most common and the way that it's set up default is to actually be able to copy the alpha from one node to another. So you could basically just select your alpha from here, and assuming, okay, so I have no alpha right now. Oh no, my alpha's gone. I copy it over from this one. Now I have an alpha. Bingo, bango, bongo. Perfect. One thing I would like to say is, for organization purposes, you might want to create little dot nodes. And this is just how I typically like to work, because I think it's easier to non-destructively add things in between and just make sure everything's working the way it should be. I'll control click, and now I can add a dot node, which is the same as hitting tab and typing in dot. And a dot node is essentially just like a placeholder to allow you to pipe things however you need to get them to, without it seeming so unorganized, right? So, yeah, I don't know. Allows you to just connect things just like that. One thing that I do really enjoy using, so I'm just going to go through some hotkeys that I use all the time. Using Y to connect your nodes, or Shift Y, depending on the order that you select them in, it's goated because it makes working on a laptop or a trackpad much easier. I didn't really learn and memorize this one until like a year ago, and it was so painful, especially because I would use TeamViewer on my phone, and I'd be like double clicking and trying to drag these nodes to one another, and it's a pain. So just grab the node that you would like to connect your above node to, and you simply click Y. And the order that you select them in does matter, so you do need to select them in the right order. If you were to try to select it like this and you hit Y, nothing happens. Now, assuming nothing happens, you could do Shift Y, but just to keep things easier, select the node you would like to input to, then select what you are inputting into the node and hit Y, and now you're good to go. Remembering that frame center is selected by F. You can also do that in here, assuming you zoom in or zoom out. Just very easily, depending on what you're viewing, you can get a whole range of options, right? So it just allows for easy organization, easy navigation. Now, one thing you'll notice is this is becoming quite a bit of a mess. Now, you might think, oh, I'm just going to drop these all down, and now they're taking up less real estate, and I can only have the one open that I need. That's an option. But I typically only like to have the ones that I'm currently working with up here. And I've also had moments where I was accidentally messing with the parameters of nodes that I did not intend to mess with. So immediately, I would actually change this from 10 down to 3. So you're only allowing the top 3 most recent nodes parameters to be accessible to you. And if you want to be really, really extra, which again, I no harm, no foul, I would click on this little lock icon, and that basically pulls up a separate window. So you have to close it when you're done with it. And it just makes it really easy to know, okay, I'm working on this plate right now. Okay, I'm changing the color space. I'm changing whatever I'm changing. Maybe you want to start at a different frame or offset it or add in some type of expression here. Okay, I know that I'm doing it here rather than doing it here. And that can sometimes make a difference if you're talking about 2 different video files. And if their names are random letters and numbers, just miscellaneous nomenclature, you're going to have an issue keeping track of what is what and where it is. So couldn't recommend more that you leave this to 3, even possibly lock it up, especially if you're working with one monitor. It's going to be so much easier to navigate and so much easier for you to understand. But let's just look over how to do like a simple, well, let's do a couple things, right? So let's do a simple keyframe animation. So down here we have our transform node. Let's just say it starts at 1 and it shrinks down. Let's give ourselves an alpha real quick just to keep it constant. And then we right click on the parameter we'd like to set a key to. We set a key, we go down to the end. We would then lower it. It sets a key automatically. In Houdini, it doesn't, so I get confused sometimes. I'm just making sure. So it sets a key automatically when you change the parameter. And then you would be able to go to your dope sheet, kind of, not too complicated. Reminds you of what it would look like when you opened up your parameters and actually saw the positioning of those keyframes. And here you could change it so that way the interpolation is different. Most common one I'm using is going to be linear, smooth, or constant. So smooth is very similar to like a Bezier. It doesn't automatically set your curves to it, but it does give you these anchors that allow you to manipulate it in the same way. So I would do something like that. You can hold control and that will give you a little bit more going one way or the other way. So let's say we want it to start really slow and then speed up, and maybe we want it to be really sharp over in the middle there. So like just a standard S-curve animation that you would do quite frequently in After Effects. Well, boom, now we have it, right? So it starts super slow, goes fast, and slows down all the same. That's really, really typically how you'd work with something like that. Let's say we wanted to do, you want to add a roto to it. Well, in the roto node, you do have quite a few features available to you. As you'll notice here, you can access the roto node by typing in roto. I would say roto draw is going to be your friend unless you're doing paint work, and then you might want to do roto paint. And then you can also type O on your keyboard, and that will automatically bring one in. One of my favorite nodes to use. Come on, you're in a roto all the time, so it's handy dandy to have a good amount of these locked in and dialed. So merge is M, O is roto. You're going to have your read node. You're going to have your write node. Transform would be T. You can do grading with G and color correction with C. You'll notice that the grade node and the color correct node are very similar. They do work kind of similar. They have some slightly different options. But I would say generally you're going to want to just work with the grade node. You'd work with them together essentially, but I would probably just start with the grade node until I needed to make those finer tune adjustments on the shadows, midtones, or highlights, right? So like these are going to be your golden nodes, to be honest. K for the copy channel node. P would bring up roto paint. Those really are just the number one nodes that I'm using all the time, that just make the most sense for me to pick and grab. But yeah, honestly, that's the most frequently used one. Oh yeah, B is great for your blur. Yeah. So essentially, if we wanted to do a quick little roto on our checkerboard here, we would add in a roto node using O or tab and typing in roto and making sure to click roto draw. Sometimes you'll have issues with the format of the node not matching the format of what you're rotoing to. So if your roto's not coming out the way you think it should and it's like getting cut off, interestingly, just no clip works great. You do want to keep in mind this bounding box here, because as you can see, we're already extending out past the bounding box. And this is where you're going to start to notice that Nuke is better than After Effects, because it's making you pay attention to some of these details, right? So if you're not aware, this bounding box can actually just exceed, and it could essentially be 10 times the size of your actual format. And you're looking at a 20K image, which is going to slow down your script exponentially. So if you're noticing things get out of hand, it's really important to drop down a crop node and to just make sure that your crop is being set to the format that you're working within and reformatting to that desired size, right? So I can't remember, what were we working with? The low res was 4080. So yeah, we would want to crop to 4080 by 2840, and that would be what we're looking at. Now we're not rendering outside of here. Another good thing to keep in mind when you're working is that you can actually set it to automatically work in a proxy mode, which would be half the resolution. It doesn't affect your output at all, but it does make your script run faster. I've had moments where it would mess with some nodes. So if you're not getting a result that you're expecting to get, you could try turning this on and off. And you can also set an internal crop on just the viewer itself. But it's important to also keep in mind of where your crop is actually on the final image as a whole, right? So back to where we were, let's just say that we were going to do a little quick roto. We would want to set our output mask to do an output of an RGB alpha, because we're trying to add in an alpha, right? And we can either use the Bezier tool, which is going to be most similar to the pen tool inside of After Effects, or maybe you want to work with like an eclipse or something, right? So I drew an eclipse, and as you can see, we're kind of getting an interesting result here because we're not pre-multiplying. And pre-multiplying is essentially going to multiply your image by your alpha. So if your alpha is a 0 or a 1, it's going to determine whether or not you see it all or you don't see it all. So in the background here, we're having some of that semi-transparency happen because we didn't pre-multiply. You pre-multiply, the problem goes away entirely. To do feathering, you could, so, I mean, like in theory, you could actually do all of this inside of the roto node itself. In the roto node, you can do the pre-multiplication, you can do the feathering all inside of here. As you can see, it says pre-multiply, just the RGB, the RGBA, any other values that you'd like to do, you can do the feathering. But it makes it hard for other users to be able to touch your scripts if they don't see the steps you took, which is kind of the benefit of using nodes, is that you can access different parts of the functions prior to or after one another and use them in different unique ways, right? So we've got our roto here. Maybe we want to erode that roto out just a little bit in one way or another. And then we want to add some level of a feathering. So we use our blur node or B on our keyboard. I would set the channel to just being alpha unless you also wanted to blur the colors as well. But because we're just trying to blur the alpha channel, we're just going to use the alpha channel. Now it's set to max out at 100, but that's not to say you couldn't go past 100. And as you can see, without the pre-mult, you're getting some of that semi-transparency. With the pre-mult, you're getting a clean image. And now we have this beautiful little animation that makes no sense at all, but is of the checkerboard speeding up and slowing down as it zooms from 100% to 20%. And that's really kind of the bulk of what you need to know. Is keep in mind your bounding box, make sure to pay attention to your pre-multiplication, work in image sequences, and above all else, just try to keep things tidy and organized by making sure you maintain the structure of your B pipe being the spine of your comp and using dot nodes whenever you can. It makes it so easy for me to just be able to like disconnect this without affecting the organization of it. Whereas if I disconnected this, now suddenly it looks different. Like for example, oh, I have this straight, beautiful looking pipe, and then I delete. Well, now it looks weird. But if I keep things connected to a dot node, I can just add or remove anything before the dot node, and easy peasy. I can just select these nodes and I can push them up, and then I can add another transform node and do a different transformation and yada yada. So I don't know. It's worth maintaining some structure and organization to your scripts. It's worth trying to understand how Nuke is actually processing information on the alpha channels. And just so you understand here as well, on the bottom you can see the RGB values changing, which also gives you insight of what your alpha is looking like, right? So on the black spots we're at 0, on the white spots we have a 1. We add in that blur, and now suddenly when we make our viewer accurate, you're getting some of that semi-transparency going from 0.99 down to 1 or 0 with everything in between, right? So important to pay attention. Just start. Nuke isn't as complicated as you might think it is. And until next time, make sure to seize the day, keep learning, and drop a comment if there's anything specific that you'd like me to dive into within Nuke itself. I will try my best to provide whatever insight I can without rambling and overcomplicating it too much, although I know I have a tendency to talk. So thank you so much for watching this video. Subscribe if you're new, and this is only the beginning. So I don't know. Peace.